Okay, well, I'm back. I think the problems have been solved, at least for now. So I will continue with the reading. You're listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Schoeman. And on this beautiful feast day of Our Lady of Fatima, I'm trying to do everything possible to honor her. I want to get in good with her, because I really want to spend eternity on good terms with her in heaven. And so I am reading the account of the apparitions to the children at Fatima back in 1916 and 17, because I'm still in 1916, because I'm reading the account of the angel appearing to them. By the way, I neglected to say at the outset of the show that this is a live call-in program. And if you wish to call in with comments or questions, the number here is 866-333-6279 or 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y. Or if you use Skype, Skype here is on_air_RM_Skype. And we've just had the first two apparitions of the angel, where the angel taught the three children more than I think most of us will ever understand about God, even though they were small children. And we're on to the third apparition. I'm reading from Sister Lucia's own memoirs. It seems to me that the third apparition must have been in October or towards the end of September, as we were no longer returning home for siesta. We went one day to the Lapa, and we said our rosary there, and the prayer the angel had taught us at the first apparition. And then, by the way, I will repeat that prayer. The children repeated it endlessly with their foreheads pressed to the ground, and it's a very worthwhile prayer, so I will simply repeat it. My God, I believe, I adore, I hope, and I love you. I ask pardon of you for those who do not believe, do not adore, do not hope, and do not love you. So anyway, they were there, they were repeating, they were saying the rosary and repeating that prayer. And while we were there, going back to Lucia's words, while we were there, the angel appeared to us for the third time, holding a chalice in his hands, with a host above it from which some drops of blood were falling into the sacred vessel. Leaving the chalice and the host suspended in the air, the angel prostrated on the ground and repeated this prayer 3 times. Most Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I adore you profoundly, and I offer you the most precious body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, present in all the tabernacles of the world, in reparation for the outrages, sacrileges, and indifference with which he himself is offended. And through the infinite merits of his most sacred heart and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, I beg of you the conversion of poor sinners. I think many of us had heard this prayer without knowing, me included, that it was dictated by the angel himself when he appeared to the 3 Fatima children. I will repeat the prayer. Most Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I adore you profoundly, and I offer you the most precious body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, present in all the tabernacles of the world, in reparation for the outrages, sacrileges, and indifference with which he himself is offended. And through the infinite merits of his most sacred heart and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, I beg of you the conversion of poor sinners. Then rising, he once more took the chalice and the host in his hands. He gave the host to me, and to Jacinta and Francisco he gave the contents of the chalice to drink, saying as he did so, take and drink the body and blood of Jesus Christ, horribly outraged by ungrateful men. Repair their crimes and console your God." Once again, he prostrated on the ground and repeated with us 3 times more the same prayer, "Most Holy Trinity, ... and then disappeared. Impelled by the power of the supernatural that enveloped us, we imitated all that the angel had done, prostrating ourselves on the ground as he did, and repeating the prayers that he said. The force of the presence of God was so intense that it absorbed us and almost completely annihilated us. It seemed to deprive us even of the use of our bodily senses for a considerable length of time. During those days, we performed all our exterior actions as though guided by the same supernatural being who was impelling us thereto. The peace and happiness which we felt were great, but wholly interior, for our souls were completely immersed in God. The physical exhaustion that came over us was also great. Wow. Okay. Now, I am just reading this, and I would say that there must be some pretty mysterious theology here. My understanding is that the church's understanding of what happened is that the angel got the chalice of consecrated wine, of the precious blood, and the host obtained them from a church, because they don't have it in heaven, and the angels can't transubstantiate. They can't confect the Eucharist. So it must have been taken from I don't want to say an ordinary mass, but a earthly mass. I also don't know what the situation was with the children, whether they had already received their first communion or not. But I would imagine they must have, or else the angel would have respected that. But I don't know. I really don't remember the chronology there. So anyway, I will now continue to the 13th of May and the first apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary to the children. Now, I believe, but you're really not listening to hear me guess, but my guess is that Lucia had already received First Communion, which is why she was able to receive the host, but Jacinta and Francesco perhaps had not, which might be why they had only received from the chalice, although again, that theology seems way beyond my pay grade. Okay, the 13th of May, 1917. High up on the slope in the Cova de Iria, I was playing with Jacinto and Francesco at building a little stone wall around a clump of firs. Suddenly, we saw what seemed to be a flash of lightning. "We'd better go home," I said to my cousins. "That's lightning. We may have a thunderstorm." "Yes, indeed," they answered. We began to go down the slope, hurrying the sheep along towards the road. We were more or less halfway down the slope and almost level with a large holm oak tree that stood there, when we saw another flash of lightning. We had only gone a few steps further when there before us, on a small holm oak, we beheld a lady all dressed in white. She was more brilliant than the sun, and radiated a light more clear and intense than a crystal glass filled with sparkling water when the rays of the burning sun shine through it. We stopped astounded before the apparition. We were so close, just a few feet from her, that we were bathed in the light that surrounded her, or rather, which radiated from her. Then Our Lady spoke to us. "Do not be afraid, I will do you no harm. Where are you from?" "I am from heaven." "What do you want of me?" "I have come to ask you to come here for 6 months in succession, on the 13th day of each month at this same hour. Later on I will tell you who I am and what I want. Afterwards I will return here yet a 7th time. Shall I go to heaven too?" Yes, you will. And Jacinta, she will go also. And Francisco, he will go there too, but he must first say many rosaries. Then I remembered to ask about two girls who had died recently. They were friends of mine and used to come to my home to learn weaving with my eldest sister. Is Maria das Neves in heaven? Yes, she is. I think she was about 16 years old. And Amelia? She will be in purgatory until the end of the world. It seems to me that she was between 18 and 20 years of age. Are you willing to offer yourself to God and bear all the sufferings He wills to send you as an act of reparation for the sins by which He has offended and of supplication for the conversion of sinners? Yes, we are willing. Then you are going to have much to suffer, but the grace of God will be your comfort. As she pronounced these last words, the grace of God will be your comfort, Our Lady opened her hands for the first time, communicating to us a light so intense that as it streamed from her hands, its rays penetrated our hearts and the innermost depths of our souls, making us see ourselves in God. Who was that light more clearly than we see ourselves in the best of mirrors? Then, moved by an interior impulse that was also communicated to us, we fell on our knees, repeating in our hearts, O most holy Trinity, I adore you. My God, I love you in the most blessed sacrament. After a few moments, Our Lady spoke again. Pray the Rosary every day in order to obtain peace for the world and the end of the war. Then she began to rise serenely, going up towards the east until she disappeared in the immensity of space. The light that surrounded her seemed to open up a path before her in the firmament, and for this reason we sometimes said that we saw heaven opening. Wow. Okay. I think what I'm going to do now is, since now we are coming up against the halfway point, I'm going to take the canonical break, so to speak, the normal break we take about halfway through. I will once again play Regina Celli, chanted by that wonderful group, Harpa Dei, but I'm doing so also soliciting phone calls, because this is a live call-in program. If you wish to call here, and you do so during the break, I will immediately, coming out of the break, go to the phone lines and take the calls, and after that continue with the reading. The number here is 866-333-6279 or 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y. So with that, let's go to our short break. You've been listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Showman, and I'll be back in a few minutes, and in the interim, Harpa Dei chanting Salve Regina.
Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae,
It's best nostra
misericordes oculos ad nos converte.
Et Jesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende. Virgo Maria.
Well, I'm back. You're listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Schoeman. And in celebration of this wonderful feast day of Our Lady of Fatima, May 13th, the anniversary of the day in 1917 when the Blessed Virgin Mary first appeared to the Fatima children, I have been reading the account of the apparition, first of the angel and then of the Blessed Virgin Mary, to Lucia, later Sister Lucia, the eldest of the three children. And I'm tempted to stop after every sentence to reflect on all of the theological depth of knowledge that's being reflected sentence after sentence after sentence. I will just perhaps indulge myself a little bit with that first apparition discourse of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Not surprisingly, the children asked if they were going to go to heaven. And Lucia, the answer was yes. Jacinta, the answer was yes. And Francisco, the answer was he will go there, but first he must say many rosaries. Now, we all know the relationship between Our Lady of Fatima and the rosary. Also, her apparition actually at Lourdes and the rosary. She was praying the rosary, so to speak, at Lourdes, or at least having it pass through her hands. And it's easy, maybe I shouldn't say it's easy to dismiss the rosary, but, you know, the rosary is not always considered as seriously as apparently the Blessed Virgin Mary, and God considers it. Because throughout the story of Fatima, we have the incredible importance and weight, significance and effectiveness of the rosary, right? First of all, Francesco will go to heaven, but only if he says many rosaries. Now, when you think about the stakes there, I mean, the difference between spending all eternity in hell and all eternity in heaven, it would be worth it to never stop saying the rosary from this moment on until the moment we die, if it makes the difference between heaven and hell. Maybe that's an obvious and small point, but there you have it. Then you have the fact that one of Lucia's friends, who died at about the age of 18 apparently, this Amelia, will be, according to the Blessed Virgin Mary, in purgatory until the end of the world. Now, why do I think that however Amelia sinned, it wasn't worse than what is left, right, and center of us today? What I shudder to say it, but probably the majority of high school graduates, when they graduate, are guilty of. The majority of college students are guilty of. My guess is that what Amelia did was no worse than that, and yet she's going to be in purgatory until the end of time. Which brings us to the central message of Our Lady at Fatima, which is the importance of praying and mostly of offering sacrifices for the conversion of sinners. Apparently, don't ask me why, the kind of cosmic economy of salvation, divine economy of salvation, I should say, is that God wants all men to be saved. He wants all men to receive the grace of conversion, all people to receive the grace of conversion, so that no soul is lost. But how much grace of conversion he can distribute to mankind is a function of how much people who are in a state of grace pray and offer sacrifices and mortifications and penances for the conversion of sinners. So it's the engine, basically, praying for the conversion of sinners and offering sacrifices for the conversion of sinners is kind of the engine that drives salvation for all of those who aren't on their own self-initiated, so to speak, path to heaven. And the angel said, I believe it was the angel rather than the Blessed Virgin Mary, who said that the greatest penance is accepting all of the suffering that God sends us. So we don't have to scourge ourselves to blood with a barbed wire whip or something like some saints have done. But what we are called to do is to offer all of the suffering that God sends us in union with the suffering of Christ for the salvation of souls. That's one point I wanted to underline. And another point I wanted to underline is very beautiful here. The Blessed Virgin Mary says, ask the children, are you willing to offer yourselves to God and bear all the sufferings he wills to send you as an act of reparation for the sins by which he is offended and of supplication for the conversion of sinners? In other words, we have two purposes that the Blessed Virgin Mary is asking for the prayers and suffering of the children for. Purpose number one, an act of reparation for all of the offenses against the Most Holy Trinity and the Blessed Virgin Mary. So to console them for all the offenses committed against them. The second, so of course related, but it's distinct intention, is to get grace for the conversion of sinners. And it's very interesting when you read the accounts of Francesco after the apparitions and Jacinta after the apparitions. Francesco just wanted all of his prayer and all of his sufferings going to consoling the heart of Jesus. Reparation for the offenses, consoling God for the offenses against him. Whereas Jacinta was totally focused on offering all of her prayers and sufferings for the conversion of sinners. So I guess this is an exercise for all of us. Which category do we fall into? Do we more naturally, are we burning with a desire to console Jesus for the offenses committed against him? Or are we burning with a desire to see sinners receive the grace of conversion and end up in heaven? Anyway, just a little exercise for the reader. So I see we still have no callers, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to continue reading. This is the light for me to continue reading. Okay. So then I will kind of continue here. I will jump ahead to the 13th of July, 1917. So I'll skip the apparition on the 13th of June. Well, I'll read what the heck. I'll read the apparition on the 13th of June. Lucia begins, once Our Lady appears, asking, what do you want of me? And Our Lady answers, I wish you to come here on the 13th of next month to pray the rosary every day and to learn to read. Later I will tell you what I want. And then Lucia asks for various sick people to be healed. And then she asks, and then Our Lady says that she will take Jacinta and Francesco to heaven soon. I will continue with Our Lady's words, but you are to stay here some time longer. Jesus wishes to make use of you to make me known and loved. He wants to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. Now, this is also an interesting point, right? Because here you have this illiterate, I believe she was 12-year-old little girl, who didn't even know how to tell time, read a calendar or know what day of the week it was. And God chooses her to, quote, establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. And guess what? She did. She did. Think of how much devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary there is in the world. And so God certainly does a good job of choosing people. And he certainly chooses people who are the last people who we would think would be able to succeed in the task. Anyway, okay, so continuing with the apparition itself. As Our Lady spoke these last words, she opened her hands, and for the second time, she communicated to us the rays of that same immense light. We saw ourselves in this light, as it were, immersed in God. Jacinta and Francisco seemed to be in that part of the light which rose toward heaven, and I in that part which was poured out on the earth. In front of the palm of Our Lady's right hand was a heart encircled by thorns which pierced it. We understood that this was the Immaculate Heart of Mary, outraged by the sins of humanity and seeking reparation. Okay, now, this was before Our Lady revealed it to Lucia, but I think we all know that the 5 Saturdays devotion in reparation to the Immaculate Heart of Mary came from Mary's apparitions to Lucia, and that the 5 First Saturdays devotion is a extremely graced vehicle for what is the phrase here? For offering reparation to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which is so outraged by the sins of humanity. Now, of course, outraged by all the sins of humanity, but I mean, her middle name is Virgin, right? The Blessed Virgin Mary. She is the model of purity. And of course, I shouldn't say of course, but quite likely. I see we have a caller. I'll take the caller in a moment. But let me finish the thought, which is that most likely the sins that most particularly outrage the Immaculate Heart of Mary, her purity, are sins against purity. And never in history after the coming of Christ have the sins against purity cried out to God for, I don't want to say for vengeance, but cried out to God as strongly as they do today. So we certainly are in need of offering reparation. With that, I see we have a caller. What's your name and where are you calling from, please?
Hi, Roy. My name is Salvatore. I'm from Canada, Ontario.
Great. Did you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I do. Hopefully it's not too far off topic, but it's about the Novus Ordo Mass versus the Tridentine Mass. I don't have a traditional Mass around me, so I always attend the Novus Ordo Mass. Now, I have a traditional Catholic friend who says it's a sin to attend the Novus Ordo Mass because he says the priest doesn't cover under the Eucharist when they dispense it out, so drops of breadcrumb falls on the floor, and then he says the people walk all over that. So I was wondering what your view is, if there's any sort of sin attending the Novus Ordo Mass. Is it fine to attend it? It's just got me questioning it now.
Well, I don't speak with great authority, any authority really, but I would say it's a sin to say it's a sin to attend the Novus Ordo Mass. I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think I certainly don't think it's a sin to attend the Novus Ordo Mass, and I think it's a terrible thing to turn people away from attending the Novus Ordo Mass, and then on top of that, if that's the only Mass available to them, it's a double sin, so to speak, because you're depriving the people of Mass. Now, however unfortunate some circumstances may be, in some cases, in some parishes, I have seen the precious blood spilled and essentially walked over, spilled and not treated properly. I have seen the host, fragments of the host fall to the ground, of course, and so forth. And all of those things are great, unfortunate tragedies. But I don't think it's incumbent on us to say that, therefore, one should not attend the Novus Ordo Mass and receive communion until we're elected Pope. Maybe once you or I are elected Pope, we'll be in a position to say that. But until then, I think that we have to accept the Church as it is. And we certainly shouldn't deprive ourselves of the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. And perhaps one may want to make reparation for offenses against the Blessed Sacrament. That might be a good thing to do. But I certainly wouldn't recommend anyone depriving themselves of the Eucharist, because there may be sacrileges that occasionally occur because of improper treatment during the Novus Ordo Mass, which gives more room for that, of course, than the Tridentine Mass, because the rubrics allow more handling of the host and so forth. So anyway, does that answer your question? I mean, you're just one. I'm not even a cradle Catholic, so one convert's opinion. But does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you for taking my question. I'm sorry if it was a bit off topic.
Okay. Well, it's not all that off topic in a way. First of all, we have the very interesting and curious event of an angel bringing the sacrament to the children. And I think that's against the rubrics also. I don't think, I think in those days only priests were allowed to handle the Eucharist. So I'm not sure, was the angel in violation of the rubrics by holding the host and offering it to Lucia? I don't know. I'm kind of kidding about that. But also, of course, the whole theme of Fatima is offering reparation to God for sins and offenses, and certainly sacrilege. Sacrilege is a very serious sin and offense for which we should offer reparation. So I wouldn't consider it entirely off topic. Now, just to be clear, I did not say the angel placed it in Lucia's hand. I said the angel held it in his hand. The angel was not a priest, so that's what I was referring to. I know that the angel placed it on Lucia's tongue. Okay, so now we're on the 13th of July, 1917. This may be the last apparition that we have time for in this show. Maybe, maybe not. So let me read Lucia's own account of this. Once again, Our Lady appeared on the holm oak in a flash of light. And Lucia asked her, "What do you want of me?" And Our Lady replied, "I want you to come here on the 13th of next month to continue to pray the Rosary every day in honor of Our Lady of the Rosary, in order to obtain peace for the world and the end of the war, because only she can help you. I would like to ask you to tell us," this is Lucia now, "I would like to ask you to tell us who you are and to work a miracle so that everybody will believe that you are appearing to us." Our Lady's reply, "Continue to come here every month. In October I will tell you who I am and what I want, and I will perform a miracle for all to see and believe." That, of course, was the miracle of the sun on October 13th. Then back to Lucia. "I then made some requests, but I cannot recall now just what they were. What I do remember is that Our Lady said it was necessary for such people to pray the Rosary in order to obtain these graces during the year, and she continued, "Sacrifice yourself for sinners and say many times, especially when you make some sacrifice, 'O Jesus, it is for love of you, for the conversion of sinners, and in reparation for the sins committed against the Immaculate Heart of Mary.'" I'm going to just, I don't mean to be irreverent, but I was only once punched in the mouth. I think it was seventh grade, I think it was. I think it was when I was about 13 or 12, and I insulted a classmate's mother, and he punched me in the mouth. Okay? People tend to get very offended when you insult their mother. Okay? And we know whose mother the Blessed Virgin Mary is. Anyway, continuing. As Our Lady spoke these last words, she opened her hands once more, as she had done during the 2 previous months. The rays of light seemed to penetrate the earth, and we saw, as it were, a sea of fire. Plunged in this fire were demons and souls in human form, like transparent burning embers, all blackened or burnished bronze, floating about in the conflagration, at times raised into the air by the flames that issued from within themselves together with great clouds of smoke, at times falling back on every side like sparks in huge fires, without weight or equilibrium, amid shrieks and groans of pain and despair, which horrified us and made us tremble with fear. It must have been this sight which caused me to cry out, as people say they heard me. The demons could be distinguished by their terrifying and repellent likeness to frightful and unknown animals, black and transparent like burning coals. Terrified, and as if to plead for succor, we looked up at Our Lady, who said to us, so kindly and so sadly, quote, "You have seen hell, where the souls of poor sinners go. To save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. If what I say to you is done, many souls will be saved and there will be peace. The war is going to end, but if people do not cease offending God, a worse one will break out during the pontificate of Pius XI. When you see a night illumined by an unknown light, know that this is the great sign given you by God, that he is about to punish the world for its crimes by means of war, famine, and persecutions of the Church and of the Holy Father. To prevent this, I shall come to ask for the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart and the communion of reparation on the first Saturdays. If my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer, various nations will be annihilated. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, and she will be converted, and a period of peace will be granted to the world. In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc. Do not tell this to anybody. Francesco, yes, you may tell him. When you pray the rosary, say after each mystery, Jesus, forgive us. Save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of your mercy. Actually, here it just says, especially those most in need. After this, there was a moment of silence, and then I asked, is there anything more that you want of me today? No, I don't want anything more of you today. Then, as before, Our Lady began to ascend toward the east until she finally disappeared in the immense distance of the firmament. Okay, wow. Well, what can you say? Again, a whole world to know, a whole world of knowledge to absorb from this brief apparition of Mary. The need to sacrifice ourselves for sinners, the prayer, which I think most of us say after every decade of the Rosary, the reality of hell. I think in another account, Lucia says, I don't remember if she said there was like snowflakes falling from the sky during a snowstorm, the souls falling into hell, or whether she said they were like leaves in the autumn falling off the trees. But there was a tremendous, I see we have a caller with a question, so I will take it. That'll probably lead us into the end of the show. But are you there? And if you are, what's your name and where are you calling from, please?
I'm here. My name is Nick, and I'm calling from Newton, Massachusetts.
Did you have a comment or a question?
A question, yeah, I sort of a comment kind of question thing. It's regarding the Rosary and Our Lady's request to pray the Rosary. You know, I was wondering if what your thoughts on the a one rosary, like a 5-decade rosary versus the full 15, and if I don't know if at the time if that statement was given to the world, if like most people would have thought of the Rosary as it's 5 decades, or people would have understood that as all three, all 15 decades, and what your thoughts on sort of the that doing either form. I know any amount of the Rosary is good, but if that sort of if a fuller commitment to the Rosary would have more of a sort of an effect, a temporal effect, and sort of joining in that call to action with regards to the Rosary. So that was my question to you.
Sure, it's a good question, but in a way I think it's a very easy answer, which is anything is good, and the more the better. I think you're right that the Rosary in those days was understood to be all 15 mysteries, but I think people make things too complicated, to tell the truth. I mean, we basically know what we're supposed to do, and we know that anything is good, and the more the better. So I don't think there's any reason to kind of like draw lines and say this is enough and this isn't enough and so forth and so on. Just do what you can and try to do as much as you can, or try to push yourself to do a little bit more. And the Rosary isn't the only, isn't the only form of prayer. It is definitely a uniquely powerful form of prayer. But, it reminds me a little bit of the last caller about the Novus Ordo versus the TLM, the traditional Latin Mass. I know people who don't approve of the Divine Mercy Chaplet because people pray that instead of the Rosary. It distracts people from praying the Rosary, or leads them off the path of praying the Rosary and onto the path of praying the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and so forth and so on. And I really think God is much simpler than that, and what we're called on to do is much simpler than that. And there's probably more harm than good done in trying to make judgments about what's right, because you're also at the same time making judgments about what's wrong, and that's not a real happy place to be. So that's kind of my philosophy in any case, and I hope I didn't offend you. If you're still there, I hope I didn't offend you. Did I?
No, not at all.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think it's good for people to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an old, saying, KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? And I think we make things more complicated than we have to. Just think, my goodness, we're so blessed. We have the Blessed Virgin Mary as our mother. What mother comes down hard on her child if, he makes a mistake or does something a little bit wrong, and so forth? And same thing with Jesus, same thing with God the Father. They want our hearts. They want our efforts. They want our sacrifices. Remember, the biggest sacrifice that the angel asked for, the most important, was accepting what God sends us. Okay, because if you accept what God sends us, number one, you have the sacrifice He sends us, and number two, you're giving Him glory in understanding that everything that happens to us comes from His loving hand. So with that, I'm out of time. I have to say goodbye. Thanks for listening to Jesus the Promised Messiah of Judaism with me, Roy Showman. Hope you join us again next week. Same time, same place. Bye.
Thank you.
You're listening to Radio Maria, a Christian voice in your home, streaming live from our website at radiomaria.us through your smartphone on the Radio Maria.
Okay, well, now I'm going out over the live stream, over the podcast, so to speak. Sorry about the first 20 minutes. And if you're there, I'm glad that you hung in there. And thanks for watching. I enjoyed that. Happy Feast of Our Lady of Fatima. And I will not have a show next Saturday. I'm going to be in, I'm going to be in Galilee next Saturday. That's right. I'm going to be in Galilee. I'm going to be in Capernaum and the Mount of Beatitudes and all those. Well, actually, Saturday, I'd have to look it up because I'm very confused about what day of the week I'm in what place. So next Saturday I'm going to be on Mount Tabor. So there. I'll start the morning on Mount Tabor, start the morning in Nazareth, maybe praying at the Grotto of the Annunciation before breakfast or first thing, and then go to Mount Tabor, have Mass, Tridentine sung Mass probably on Mount Tabor at 10, and then spend the afternoon, Capernaum, Cursi, Primacy of Peter, Tabka, anyway, all these places of Jesus's very happy, active ministry at the Sea of Galilee. So that's what I'll be doing next Saturday this time. Following Saturday, I'll still be in Israel, so I won't be back yet. And actually, even the following Saturday, I will not be home yet. I'll be on my way home, but I won't be home yet. So I won't have a live show, certainly for the next 2 Saturdays, and probably for the following one also. Anyway, I'll keep you guys posted. Let me see if there's anything going on the chat stream before I hang up. Okay, that's it. Goodbye. Let's see, today is Saturday, so I'll have a couple of more shows before I leave on the pilgrimage. So anyway, bye for now. And I guess I'll go up to back to the opening screen. Let me figure out how to do this, my normal kind of kludgy way. Okay, there's the opening screen. I'll bring up the music and disappear.
Regina Celi,
Alleluia, qui
Regina Celi, Resurrexit sicut dixit, Alleluia. Ora pro nobis Deum. Regina Celi,